and sometimes you even see people lying on the streets dead, and you cannot even like bring them, or you cannot bury them because of the fights that are happening, or because there are Russian soldiers that are sitting somewhere nearby, and like if somebody comes closer to the body, they shoot the other person. I'm Daria, but my short name is Dasha, and I'm from Ukraine. And to be more specific, from Kiev Oblast. Kiev is the capital of Ukraine, and yeah, I'm coming from the suburbs.
So, I was wondering, what was it like growing up in Ukraine? How was your childhood?
My childhood was pretty normal. I cannot say that my life was very much different from any other child in Ukraine. So, because Ukraine was a part of Soviet Union, we obviously had a lot of influence coming from this like Soviet era, and then Russia as like the biggest country there, and everybody was kind of culturally assimilated, tried to be culturally assimilated. And even in my family, we had an interesting dynamic. My dad, he was coming from a pro-Ukrainian, quite patriotic, like family, and he spoke Ukrainian, and it was his choice to speak Ukrainian and not to start speaking Russian, as many people did do, because Russian was like the language of privileged and language of the rich, which is obviously wasn't. And my mom, she spoke Russian, and even in my family, like they would speak two different languages to each other and to me and my sister. And it was an interesting thing when I actually realized that it was not okay, kind of, because like normally in families they speak one language, and it's not normal that one person speaks in Ukrainian, another replies in Russian, and it's fine.
It's quite uncommon, as
Yeah,
if to.
yeah, it's quite uncommon, and even though it was the case for my family, and it was the case as for many other families, I grew up in a quite pro-Ukrainian and patriotic family, and in terms of this, I spoke Ukrainian since childhood, and it was my only language until I turned 12. And was the time when I started to learn Russian. Because I was in the 6th grade, and a few people moved from eastern part of Ukraine, where Russian invasion started in 2014, and they moved to Kiev, where I went to the school. And what they did, they tried to teach us that Russian is a language of privilege. And they came to us and started like teach us that like Ukrainian language is nothing. It's like the language of the village, and in the proper cities they speak Russian. And to be proper educated intellectuals, you need to speak Russian as well.
Were there like early signs of ensuing danger in Ukraine or within your community?
Well, I think in general, it wasn't that obvious that what was going to happen. There was this ongoing suspense that it started with some like worrying about what's happening, because Russia started to bring some troops and like showing off their power on the Belarusian border, and started like escalate to the point when even in schools they started to like reorganize the shelters, and we had an excursion around the school
We're
where
talking about bomb shelters.
Yeah, bomb
Yeah.
shelters. Yeah, exactly. So at some point, we even like started to have shelter excursions. That at some point, like every single class was taken out from the classes to go around the school to see like the most safe points where you should hide in terms of like if Russia attacks. And even like during our classes, we would discuss with teachers, what do you think? Is it gonna happen? Is it not? Is Russia really gonna invade again? And many people were on different sides. I remember talking to my dad about this, and I asked him, "Do you think Russia really gonna invade?" And he said, "Like, yeah, it's gonna invade." But when you never know when it's gonna happen, there were rumors that it's gonna happen like uh, around like mid February. That's why many people moved out of the country, and then but nobody knew that it was actually be a thing, and even if it's going to be one, so it was an absolute surprise for many, and like and me too. Um, you wake up at 5 a.m. because over your house, maybe like 10 meters above it, you hear a missile flying over it. And above the roof, it sounds like if the world is shaking, your house is shaking because of that missile. And you wake up, you don't understand what's happening because it's like it flies like this extremely quickly, and then another one, and then you try to look up the news. What is that? Is it like, is it maybe a airplane? Because I live somewhere next to the airport, so it's not that far, but still not as close. And you don't understand what's happening at all. There are no news, no radio, no social media, nothing. And then maybe like 20 minutes to an hour, you look up, you look at what's happening in the social media, and you can see that like neighboring cities are struck by these missiles, and that's everything's burning. And what you do is you don't know what to do, like absolutely no clue. And my mom came in and she said, back up, just in case of anything, you need to have this and that. You sit for a few moments with like card, like photo cards of your family, of like you know this like passport size pictures, and you write down the name, you write down the blood group, you write down the contact number, and anything just in case if there is something happens and there is no way to contact, you distribute these cards to every member of the family. You pack up, you put some like necessities like medicine, you put some clothes for the first time, torch, and a few other things. There was like a whole list circulating on the internet what you need to have, and you would go through this and like take it out what you have and what you don't. And my dad during this time he just like gets in the car, goes to the nearest gas station to fuel the to yeah fill the tank, and just to have it in case if we need to evacuate rapidly. My mom, myself, and my sister, we reorganized the basement in our house so that we could stay there for some time. and we bring some mattresses, or we bring some food, a cooker, and appliances that you need if you need to stay there for longer. And after this, you don't know what to do.
As a civilian, and you were quite young, I would presume, as a teenager, who didn't have much to do with the war itself. What went through your mind? Can you recall any thoughts playing around?
I couldn't understand why it was happening. Like, what have we done to actually start it all? Like, Russian side would always say that we're coming to save you for like Russian speaking society there from bad Ukrainians who make you speak Ukrainian, who make you abandon Russian culture. And I was there speaking Russian. I was forced to kind of be involved in Russian culture. And it was like a moment of realization when how we can even be brothers. There is a saying that Ukrainians and Russians are pretty much the same nation. Brothers by blood, by culture, very close. And you're just sitting there and you count all the missile strikes you hear. And you text it to the group chat with your friends, and they also count them in where they are staying. And you're thinking, that can't be real. It's just something that shouldn't be happening. And you start to understand that war is something that can come whenever to whoever. And when you were a child, for example, and you heard of the war in Middle East or like anywhere in the world, it was so far away, so ununderstandable, and like it did not relate to you at all. You start to understand like what it was for them.
I came across Bucha massacre, and the carnage was something similar to the scenes of World War II,
Oh yeah.
being honest. So, what was the state of, how was the damage incurred? What was the state, like severity of damage that was done within your community? Can you remember the scenes that you saw?
Yeah. Um, the first few days in the Kiev Oblast, Kiev region, were absolutely insane. The Russians went rapidly from the north down through the Kiev region. And as you mentioned, Bucha and Irpin, they are literally like 10, 15 minutes by car from me, where I live. And they were damaged much more than my home village. And what happened there was much worse. But even in the place where I stayed, we saw quite a few horrific things. Houses were destroyed, some of them were damaged by the missiles, some of them were burning, and nobody could stop the burning because how you can get the firefighters if there is fights on the street and some tanks are running down and up from on
We're
the
talking
street.
Russian tanks, yeah.
Russian and Ukrainian tanks, both ways. And Russians came from the north, and there is a main road that like people used to escape from Kiev to western part of Ukraine, where it's much safer. It was and it is now, and many people were trying to escape either from the villages occupied or from the villages were around or Kiev, and they were writing like kids on the car, and or just like civilians or people, and they try to escape, and Russians would just fire them, despite what was written on the cars. And at this time, I was volunteering in a school where there was a quick hospital set up and a place where we would cook for soldiers or people who needed some food at the time. And at some point, like a car comes from that side, and there is a man as a wheel. His head is covered in blood. It's dripping all over his clothes, and we were coming there to help him, like, and like just put the bandages on and etc. But he's just screaming, don't even care about me. There is a man in the back seat, and he's much worse." And you just open the door, and just like the whole pool of blood, and the man is bleeding really heavily, and you're trying to help him, and somebody is setting up a car to get him to the capital, to because there is a proper hospital. And honestly, I still don't know if he survives, but it's not really like the one case. There were so many cases when there were children who lose their limbs. There were people who were killed, and it's just a horror of war. And sometimes you even see people lying on the streets dead, and you cannot even like bring them, or you cannot bury them because of the fights that are happening, or because there are Russian soldiers that are sitting somewhere nearby, and like if somebody comes closer to the body, they shoot the other person, no matter if it's a civilian or a soldier. Or what also happened is that when there were like dead people on the streets, you also could not come up to them, because Russians would often put some explosives onto them, and if you tried to move it, you're dead again.
What was the, in your community at least, like what was the condition of resistance against Russian soldiers?
Well, yeah, the weapons were given out to people. And like in the morning of the full-scale invasion, many men showed up to the administration center in my village to get the ammunition, and they were given, I believe, AK-45 or something. And they the whole battalions were formed like this in the morning, and they were patrolling the village and making the fortifications and block posts and etc. And the whole community was extremely united when some men were doing this, and they were like literally creating a battalion from nothing, teaching others how to shoot often, and others were cooking, some preparing food, setting up a hospital. Somebody was baking bread for those who needed it. Somebody was making Molotov cocktails, and you were learning many things during this time. I still have the recipe somewhere in the back of my mind. So, like, even children were involved.
Speaking of fighting well-equipped war-bound Russian soldiers with homemade makeshift weapons, and that too coming from a normal citizen who wasn't part of military a day ago, where does this sense of defiance and resistance emerge from? What made you, be ready to prepare that Molotov cocktail?
it's not even the patriotic sense. I think it's just you don't even fight for the country, you fight for those you love, as somebody once said to me. And this is something you understand really quickly, that if you don't do it yourself, nobody will. And you just get the sense and understanding of who you are, where you're coming from, and what is different between you and them, and how important the land is, the land where you grow up, and the fact that you can lose it the next day or even today makes you think that no, there must be something done. And to be honest, you don't even think about it. You just do it because this thinking process is like happening somewhere behind your consciousness. Like you don't think about it. You just know what you need to do. Despite like all the bloodshed that is happening on the background, all the explosives and everything, and the fact that the Russians are probably like somewhere 5 kilometers away from you coming, and you don't know if you're gonna leave next second, you still doing as much as possible to help others and be prepared for the future.
On the February the 24th, when Putin addressed Russia, he claimed that there was a need to save the Russian-speaking people in Donbas region and beyond. So, as a girl who, if I'm not mistaken, partially shares that Russian heritage, the very language you so eagerly wanted to learn as a kid, the language that became a cherished part of your identity, I would say, language was tragically invoked as a nominal cause of war. So, how did you manage to reconcile the collision of identity and your sense of self? How did it go?
For myself, it happened before the invasion. I reconsidered my Russian speaking identity like a month prior to this, because I was reading a lot about history. I was reading about a lot of philosophy and asking my grandparents and parents about many things, about like my own identity, where I'm coming from, and how important it is, and the struggles often faced by my ancestors to speak their own language and ability to have our own culture. And that is when the shift happened for me. And I started to like bring in this idea that like how, like even to people who I know, who I grew up with, and we all were speaking Ukrainian until we all were 12. And at some point there was a shift. Like I started to question as like why it happened. Was it really necessary? And I moved back. I stepped back to the 12-year-old myself and asked, what the hell are you doing? Like, and it's like was exactly during the time when Russians invaded the eastern part of Ukraine, Donetsk, Lugansk, and annexed Crimea. It's just like feels really weird to like. That is really weird when I look back to it. Maybe it should not have happened at all. But for many people, exactly like the full-scale invasion in February was a point when they started to reconsider their like identities, and my mother as well. And as I mentioned, she was coming from a Russian-speaking family. She's half Belarusian, and my grandparents and my uncle live in Russia. And for her, it was even more, even more hurtful, I think, because her family is in Russia, like her dad is in Russia, and when he calls her and says that Russians are good, we're coming to help you, don't be worried, and these Nazis are not going to do anything to you because good Russians are coming to save you, and that's when you don't really understand like what's happening in their head, and you start to reconsider like, why do I speak Russian? Should I speak Russian? Is it still morally okay to speak it? And how you can look up to the culture of people and the language of people who came to kill you. It's quite of a shift in your mind, how you from praising the culture, going through all the stages of grievance, from hatred to just not understanding to acceptance, and then you move to something else, which is probably became much more important for me, is to be a person who promotes my own culture and be some kind of a ambassador and a person who knows, who has learned quite a few things to bring them to people who don't.
How does it shape, how has war, the Russian invasion, shaped your feelings towards Russia and Russians? As a Ukrainian citizen who went through an extraordinary circumstances, do you feel hatred towards Russians?
Not anymore.
But you used to.
I think hatred is a natural response to something what you cannot process. And when you can see people who you knew being killed, or somebody you may not have known personally, but you know that is like somebody's friend, and that person was really important to your relative or your other friend, and you see what they're going through, how you cannot feel hatred. It's like when you're a victim of any crime, how can you not hate the one who does this crime? But hatred makes you less humane, I'd say. Like, it sometimes can lead to lots of cruel things, and like, if you hate them, you at some point can stop being human. And if you hate Russians with your full heart and brain, how are you any better than them? Are you better than people who scream on you on the internet that you holes, you are fucking am I allowed to swear? Okay, you holes, you do not deserve to live, you should die, all of you, and we should erase all of you, cut all your genitals so that you would not reproduce, and etc., etc. And if you hate somebody with a full heart, just like they do often hate Ukrainians, it doesn't make you any better. And for me, it became a point when I realized that if you truly hate somebody, you cannot be a person in general. Like, hatred is not a solution. You just, I just cut it off from my life, and I do not regret it. And I think I just accepted the fact that we will never be brothers again, so-called brothers as we used to be. And we never can expect peace.
Reflecting upon the whole atrocious experiences, what has war taught you? Or to put it in another way, how has your perspective towards life changed because of the conflict?
Mm, I think I became Ukrainian. That's the main thing I can say.
Having seen the fragility of mankind with your eyes, and how precarious our existence is, someone else's decision from thousands of miles away could end this beautiful life that we have right now. What do you make of human life so far with your experiences?
As I said, life is the most precious thing we can have, and we should cherish it. Yet, when you live in Ukraine, life often becomes something very precarious in a way. Like you live in this state of a Schrodinger cat. You alive and dead at the same point. You have buried yourself multiple times. You have buried yourself, you have buried your family, everyone you ever knew and ever loved. And you live with an understanding that at any point you may not live again. You have.
Does it add a sense of meaning and purpose to your life once you make out of it?
Yeah, you start appreciate every second. You just look into this and thinking, if I'm dying tomorrow, what the heck am I doing now? And that just made me live more and to take as much as possible and do as much as possible. And it just removed any fear and uncomfortability, and you just do things. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're don't work out as well as you want it to be, but eventually you just like have this sense of living now, this exact moment, and you start to appreciate life much more. You start to appreciate people around you much more, and you say words of love, of appreciation, any words much quicker and much more honest, because this is something that you may not be able to say next moment.
On your personal level, at least for you individually, do you think there will be a sense of forgiveness to the damages and losses caused on either front should the opportunity to attain peace present itself?
I don't know my. I don't know how you can really forgive somebody who has done something like this. It's like if somebody murders your sister or your brother, can you ever forgive them for this? You can accept this, you can accept the grievance, you coming this through, but eventually you can accept this, but and you can maybe forgive, but truly love, I don't think it's going to be ever possible. And I don't even think that love is a solution anymore because of how traumatized everyone in Ukraine is. It's absolutely terrible how younger children to like oldest people in society, they all are traumatized. Like I have talked to children that have lost their parents, and they were talking about this like it was absolutely nothing. Like there was this boy in the hospital where I went to check on, like, because it was a hospital I worked with supplying some medication from the Western Ukraine to there so that they could treat people. And I came there to like see what the state is in the hospital and how many people they are and what's happening. And there was this boy, he was like maybe like 7 or 8, and he was like showing me a picture at some point after some conversation that, oh, look, yeah, and this is my mom. And on this picture, there is a leg of somebody lying on the ground with some bits of the building around. And he was like talking about this, like, yeah, this is the candies we brought from our home. And you're just like, you sit there and you don't understand like how these children are gonna live with the whole of the tragedy they're going through. And like how people who have lost their families, who have lost their homes, their everything, how they can forgive somebody who has done it. Is it possible? Maybe forgiveness is possible after like many, many years, but love? No, I don't think so. And I don't even know if peace is possible because many wars are fought until the point when somebody loses, until they surrender one of the other country. And there are only a few ways that this conflict can end. And in 2 out of 3 chances, if Ukraine does not win this war, it's going to be either frozen and then Russia attacks again, like it, because it happened like after 7 years from 2013 in 2022 again. And this whole tragedy happens again. Or it just will continue going on until there will be no Ukraine at all. I'm thinking about this a lot these days, that at some point I will not be able to return home because Russian troops are escalating again, much worse. And over the last 2 years, I was trying to go back home quite a few times, like often like twice per a few months. And the thing is that I'm afraid that in a few months or years that I will not be able to return home because there will be no such state as Ukraine. It's gonna be small Russia, as Russians often call us.
How thin is your hope, or virtually how hopeless you are that about one day there could be peace in Ukraine and you could make a return trip when the war ends?
Well, despite all the thinking that I have, I'm really hopeful for the peace. And I don't even know what this peace will look like if it happens. Hopefully, of course. There will be so many issues with that, like reintegrating all of the territories and people and all the people who were like living under Russian propaganda for many years. How it is gonna be possible if after the establishment of peace, like what is gonna be the diplomatic situation, what's like, and like even this forgiveness, is it ever gonna be there? Can we ever expect Russia to be a peaceful country? Or we will be foolish or fooled again that in 2014 we agreed that there is a peace between us, kind of, but eventually this happens. And if there is another peace agreement, will it not happen again? And I think the last thing I have to say, or rather ask, support Ukraine and read proper news, that check the information, and don't let propaganda get into your head. No matter where you are or who you are, think for yourself. And Slava Ukraini.
ऊ चाहिँ दौड्दै गयो के एम्बुलेन्स आयो र गोली खाएर आयो। साथी म त मरेँ भन्यो के त्यति बेला। अनि उसको मैले मलमपट्टि गरिदिएँ। पुरै त्यो बेडसिट ल्याएर ब्लडै ब्लड थियो। बेडसिट च्यातेर उसलाई पुरै बाँधेँ के मैले। अनि उसले भन्यो, साथी म त मर्छु होला, मलाई पानी मात्रै ल्याइदे। उसले घरको बारेमा नि कुरा गरेन कि।